we record our meetings so that the public is able to use them later. Oh, well, wait. That's a member of the public.
Good morning, everybody. It is so nice to see all of you, or see as many faces as I possibly can on one little screen. I'm going to call us to order for our leadership team meeting. It's 11:31. And I do want to say welcome. We've got all kinds of new folks and guests, and it's so nice to have you all here. So thank you very much. I will just take one moment to say I'm having some technical difficulties today. And I think I've got like the belts and suspenders thing going on, but if something happens and I fade away, Andrea, I will tag you in. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? Hearing none, we will continue. We have a minute or two for public comment. Does anybody?
I'm here.
Is that Kim?
Yes.
All right, you've got your minute to make your public comment. Please go ahead.
I recommend John Moore be general manager for Green Mountain Transit.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Amy.
Is there anybody else from the public present? Okay, I do want to say, Bethany, I'm not sure that we've had an opportunity to meet yet, so welcome. Bethany is our alternate, I hope, still from Essex Junction. So welcome.
I think, I don't know.
I don't know. We'll take you in that way. And then in the boardroom, we've heard that we're getting a traveler to come join and learn and teach us. And she's been able to join us here in the conference room. And Clayton, I don't know if you want to introduce her to the group or let her introduce herself.
Sure. And so we are very lucky to be participating in a 4-week reciprocal exchange program that's hosted by the State Department. And with me in the conference room is Aun, who is joining us from Jakarta, Indonesia. And she's going to be working on a project where she takes a look at our costs cost comparison between our diesel electric buses and our our diesel buses and our electric battery buses. She's also going to be learning a little bit about the Americans with Disabilities Act. And while she's here, we will be considering what a potential reciprocal exchange would look like to have a member of GMT go to Indonesia. And so, Aun, is there anything you'd like to say to the folks?
Thanks, Clayton. Hi, everyone. My name is Aun. I'm from Indonesia. It's nice to join this meeting and nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And sorry I put you on the spot, but I wanted to just take a moment to welcome you in. We will move forward on our agenda. We have 2 meeting minutes to approve, August 11th and September 8th. And I'll entertain a motion to approve or certainly receive edits as appropriate.
Amy, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from August 11th and September 8th, 2025 as presented.
Thanks, Bob.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Andrea. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Wonderful. So now we get down to the meat of what we're here to do today. And that's kind of move our conversation around service planning priorities. And Clayton, I'll kick that off to you
Sure. And so, and this will just be a brief intro for me, because then I'm going to be turning it over to Chris and Jamie. They're going to be talking to us about helping sort of set a pathway for us to have a rule on service prioritization. And with our positive financial news, allowing us to take a little bit of a breather before we have to start evaluating service again for potential reduction or modification. We thought that this would be a great time to do some of that work where we put our values into a document to help us make decisions about what our service should look like. And so I'm going to turn it over to Chris to talk about sort of some items that we've done in the past, some of the topics that we'll be looking at in upcoming meetings as we work through this process. And also we'll hear a little bit from Jamie about our provider and rider advisory groups that will be standing up in the coming months and will be in place just at the right time to provide some feedback to us on this work. And so I'm going to turn it over to Chris now. And Chris, where have we been and where are we headed?
Morning, everyone. So there's sort of three overarching things that we'll talk about today. I'm going to share my screen. And so the first one is we, as Jamie, Clay, and I have been sort of discussing this topic, we wanted to put together a brief, brief outline that sort of will help the leadership committee and the board sort of walk through this process. And this is certainly a really rough draft, rough sketch. We're just trying to sort of get some thoughts on paper. And so let's see if this works. Does everyone see my screen?
We do.
Excellent. Awesome. So the first piece really here is sort of this overarching document. There's sort of three items that are included in it. One is sort of a couple of purpose statements that we just wanted to draft, just reminding us as staff sort of what we're working on here is. And so the three things we outlined there is one is establishing a clear and repeatable process for these service guidelines, service prioritization, engagement, sort of all-encompassing of the pieces that we're hoping to touch with this new rule.
Chris,
Another purpose
could
is.
you make it screen a little larger, please?
Oh, yes,
Yes.
I can do that. How's that? Sorry about that. Is that better?
I think one
Awesome.
more.
One more?
Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully that's readable.
Yeah.
The second purpose statement that we want to include is really helping better define what the roles are and expectations are for the board and for the staff as we both develop the rule and also once the rule is in effect, what that looks like. And the third, and this third one is really coming from stuff that we've heard in the past and stuff that's coming up as part of the assessment study, which is really providing the public, the municipalities, and our partner agencies with transparency on how decisions are made at GMT and sort of when to get involved. And that really is touching on the pieces that Jamie's going to go over is, we collect feedback and we hear from folks all year round, but really trying to create concerted efforts so everyone knows when to give their feedback, when to give their suggestions, and how we're going to take those suggestions moving forward. I'm actually going to skip to section 3 of this document first. So one thing that we'll be updating is this sort of roadmap. This sort of mimics the timeline that Clayton had provided for the board on sort of all the different work that the board is going on, but this is really specific to the work here on updating or creating this new rule. And so, we're here today. We're going to be just talking about the outline moving forward and also looking at some documents that GMT has currently. And so what we'll do as part of this outline is put together what the main topic we'll be discussing either at leadership or at the board, and then also previewing, just giving a brief preview on what we'll be talking about at the next either leadership or board meeting. And so right now we only have the first 2 or 3 meetings sort of outlined. And you'll see at next leadership committee, we'll be looking at some timeline documents and looking at some peer reviews that we're going to be doing at what other agencies have done. And one other thing I meant to note here, which is tangentially related, is as part of this overall effort, we are going to need to update the board's current fair and service change policy. We will have to actually do one small edit that we'll be bringing to the leadership committee next month. That stems from the triennial audit that we had a couple months ago. And so that's something we just need to address, a small item sooner rather than later. And then we'll be really updating that moving forward as part of this process. And so, you know, a couple items here that, you know, going back to one of those first purpose statements around where is the board and the leadership committee going to really be diving into things. So there's sort of six items that we identified at the start. And so one item is really, and this is really going to be the guiding stuff. This is the first one is really, what are those service guiding principles? What are the principles that are important for the organization as it relates to service planning? And so, you know, those could be a variety of things that we've seen over the years, like sort of having customer-focused decision-making, or having service levels that take into account our staffing, things of sort of that nature that we want to include that are really going to guide the work that we're doing here. The next one, and this is something that we've seen both as part of the assessment work that we're doing, as well as sort of an initial review of what other agencies have really decided, is, you know, we have all these principles, we have sort of these guiding words that are helping us figure out what our service looks like, but how do we actually want to take those words and take action on it? And so one thing that we've seen is sort of two approaches that agencies across the country have taken. One is having sort of a more formulaic approach to how they take those terms and put it into the work that the staff and board needs to do. So for example, one thing that we talked about last year at the onset of the service reduction process is, you know, how much high frequency service versus coverage across our geographic area that we serve do we want to, and sort of those trade-offs. And so some agencies have taken an approach where they've put a number to those different principles, and that helps staff and the board sort of work to create a set of information that can meet that. And the other point, if we decide not to go that approach, is sticking with sort of these broad stroke statements and trying to create guidelines that meet those broad stroke statements. The third piece, and this is part of what we're going to be talking about today, is we'll be looking for board input on sort of route design principles. And one thing that I'll share is, you know, this is pretty standard across the industry. There's a lot of concepts that, for the most part, you know, we're going to tweak. We're going to look at the documents that GMT has had in the past, but for the most part, these are pretty standard, and we're just going to try and make sure that we adapt it for the GMT context. Related to that is there's a lot of data that we have and that we could be using, and sort of what are those metrics that we're going to be using, and we'll be looking for board input on sort of what information do we want to use and track to measure the performance of the agency. That could include things like the state route performance report or other metrics, again, that have been outlined in previous documents, as well as other things that we'll hopefully learn from both our assessment study as well as the peer agency review. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be talking about the board updating the sort of board policy and integrating our current service change policy into this. And so I skipped over E because I wanted to really pass that over to Jamie to talk about sort of the work that the Rider Engagement Committee and the Partner Engagement Committee, and sort of how that's going to fold into this work.
Do you want me to do that before you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to do
Show
it,
your
yeah, that'd be
examples?
great.
Sure. So as folks probably recall, at the beginning, about spring, we set up a rule on engagement committees, both to have a rider engagement committee in Chittenden County and a partner stakeholder engagement committee. We took a tiny pause as we were going through the service reduction process because, you know, both of those committees do require some additional staff besides myself to, you know, set the tone, explain to people how our funding works, how our planning processes work. Like, it needs some other staff besides me. And so given capacity, we took a pause, but we're back now that we have some breathing room, and we're getting ready to start the process to recruit for these two committees. So the way that we sort of envisioned this working, every time we make service changes, Every time we're out at public meetings, you know, we are accepting rider feedback. And sometimes it feels like that's not enough feedback, right? Like folks want to be able to provide their ideas at various points throughout the year, not just in reaction to a service change at that time. And so the rider engagement committee will sort of help us focus on more frequent requests for information. So they, you know, if the agency is looking for data on specific things, that group will both be sort of like a street outreach team where we'll have more people who can go to bus stop locations or popular locations where people are sort of congregating in the system, and they can help provide information. They can solicit more feedback. It's going to meet 4 times a year, but then there'll be engagement activities in between the 4 meetings. We're hoping that there's, you know, a culmination of information that eventually goes to Chris and his team. And by looking at all of the feedback received throughout the year, the agency can kind of set up a list of priorities, you know, based on where we are financially, where we are, you know, in the planning process, and as it aligns with the new planning policies. So that group will be, will help us with that, you know, not alienating our core riders. It will help us be more transparent, and it will help us, you know, provide more equitable opportunities for engagement for folks. That way we're hearing more voices and using that information through the planning process. The second group that we're looking to start, and we're hoping to kick off the recruitment for the Partner Stakeholder Engagement Committee at the CATMA Summit on the 14th. It's a really good opportunity where we already have a captive audience at our table where we can really dive a little deeper into what that committee is going to be doing. We can talk to key stakeholders and try to engage them, you know, to be part of the process. That group will help us for a lot of reasons. Mostly, all service planning that we're doing is affecting our community, and these partner and stakeholder organizations are working with clients in the community. We're hoping that they help us cultivate political and community support for the changes we're making. They are also, you know, as Clayton's looking and working with the legislature for new revenue streams or, you know, new long-term funding, these partner and stakeholder groups will be really key advocates for the organization. And hopefully they're also another engagement tool. You know, we will have a captive audience where when we're making changes or we're soliciting feedback, these partner and stakeholder engagement, these groups will be able to go back to their constituents, their clients, and it'll just be another avenue for us to solicit more feedback. And then through the entire engagement process, we're hoping to also have information available for board members. I think it's really important that every community that is part of the organization, the agency, has the opportunity to provide feedback. And we hear a lot, you know, that the towns or the cities in our service area are receiving feedback from riders and from residents. And so through this whole process of starting these engagement groups and changing the way that we're communicating through the planning process, we'll also be creating an avenue for board members to assist with gathering some of this community feedback. I don't know if you want me to go much further into that, Clayton. Is that what you were sort of hoping to?
I think that you covered it wonderfully.
So I think just wanted to pause here, you know, sort of on these sort of overarching conceptual items before we sort of provide some of examples of service guidelines that GMP has had in the past. Just wanted to see if there's any questions, any feedback. Are we hitting the mark on sort of the direction that the board is looking for?
Well, from my perspective, I think you're hitting all the stuff I was thinking we need to do is trying to get that whole spectrum and really dig down to the real source again. So yeah, sounds right to me.
Thanks. And because I just cannot scroll through all of this. I don't know, Susan, were you gonna make a comment? Because I know this is kind of a passion of yours, and I want to make sure that your ideas are incorporated.
So as you know, I think that it's, I'll just restate it. I think it's really important for us to have an idea of what GMT's vision is for itself before embarking on establishing a policy like this. I understand Clayton pointed out that we really don't have the luxury of a lot of time to do kind of visioning work. So I do really appreciate that, but I'm really struggling with how we go about creating a document like this and a policy like this, and then try to develop a vision after the fact. I don't know what kind of, how flexible a policy like this could be ultimately changed. But one of the things that has been on my mind that I haven't found the right time to bring to the board's attention, or question that I have, is the idea of like just our overall service pattern. Like, I'm a big fan of Strong Towns, so Chuck Marone's nonprofit organization that really thinks about transportation and community development in a way that's oftentimes non-traditional. I don't know to what extent the board is familiar with the Strong Towns work, but and I will say upfront, I am not, and I don't claim to be at all any kind of transit expert, but I'm intrigued by the ideas that Strong Towns puts forward in thinking about communities, transportation, walkability, bikeability, and transit, and really looks at transit as a tool to create wealth in communities. And it's not something that this board has really talked about much. So I would say Strong Towns views transit less as a social services organization and more as a way in which we can build value in our communities. And so one of the things that I've read that's intriguing to me is the idea that a regional transit service could focus on more of a local circulator routes with core routes between, also providing core routes between town centers. And in my work with the walk bike communities, this is something I've heard, that there's interest in having more service that provides local circulation in communities. This may have been a model that GMT did in the past, I don't know, but it's something that really makes a lot of sense to me. And I haven't found the space yet in our work where we can talk about something like that. So that's a real shift from, I think, what we have been doing. But I don't see where we're able to have that kind of bigger vision conversation. So I just wanted to put that out there right now at this point in the conversation. So again, I think what I like about the Strong Towns approach is a real focus on financial sustainability of the transit agency, thinking about growth in a more incremental way, and really kind of focusing on where there's already sort of this walkable, bikeable kind of infrastructure, and supporting that with transit, and then growing from there. So I'll stop talking now. And yeah, thank you.
I appreciate all of that. And I do, I'm optimistic that through this conversation, we can start to flesh out our vision in not so much a top down, but as a sideways kind of activity, because we don't quite have the luxury of the time. But I do hope that this is part of that conversation. So Susan, your comments and sentiments are so well heard. And I will try to keep them in mind as we're going forward and do our best to be visionary in the conversation that we're having. So any other comments, or I'll turn it back over to Chris to keep walking us through.
Something, if I could weigh in a little bit, I thought a lot after the last board meeting from Susan's input at that meeting. You know, one of the reasons why we sort of stopped looking at the broader vision discussions earlier this year was that we sort of felt that it was a bit awkward to be doing it at a time when we were transitioning our rural commissioners away. You know, at that time, our rural commissioners weren't really that engaged with the transfer process, and so it seemed like, you know, going through this exercise of developing our vision for GMT that is post-rural transfer, you know, may not have been right at that time. But I think that what we see now is that, you know, Catherine and Bob are engaged with, and Tasha with the transfer to RCT, and Christian's engaged with the transfer to TVT. And so, you know, perhaps starting on this vision work now would maybe not be perceived so negatively like we were, you know, worried about just 3 or 4 months ago. And so, Amy, I think that if we did find that we wanted to pause to do some greater, you know, organizational vision work, that I'm not sure that would, or we may have the time to do that if, as long as that was like a 2 or 3 month, you know, process, as opposed to a, you know, 6 to 12 month process.
Sorry, unmuting is not going easily. Go ahead, Bob.
I agree with Susan that doing a vision as a piece, I kind of see this activity is actually doing the vision. I kind of see that's part of it, because part of the process that Chris had mentioned was trying to figure out whether it's a formulaic type process versus principles-based process, and that gets you into that vision discussion, is what do you want to be as you do that analysis. So I think it's all interlocked in the same thing. It just may be what words we use to describe it.
And if I could just add, I think, you know, one of the preview topics for the next leadership committee that I think might help frame it a little better is one of the things that Jamie Clayton and I have been talking about is the timeline. So what does that actually look like when you put pen to paper, and what is the board looking at? What is staff looking at? What is the public looking at? And I think that might help. It's going to take a couple of years, like, you know, once we finish this policy and it's sort of in effect, it will still take some time to actually get caught up once we actually have this new timeline. And I think that will, I think once you see the timeline, I think that will help show sort of, to Bob's point, that we are building towards this sort of process. And I think both can happen at the same time. I think there's a lot of parts of this rule that are, as you'll see from sort of previous efforts that the organization has done, again, is pretty standard across all transit agencies, and many transit agencies that are featured in things like Strong Towns or other agencies. I don't have it in my office right now, but I have probably an IKEA-sized bag of service guidelines from across the country that I've collected over the past 5 or 6 years. And I think that's a lot of those agencies are the ones that are featured, you know, and talked about in sort of these innovative ways that we just need to be able to figure out how to adapt it for GMT style.
Can I just add one quick point too? A lot of agencies also look to their riding public through the engagement process to help set the vision for the organization. We have traditionally not done that. And so this is sort of that first step in starting to switch the way that we're doing our engagement process, which would allow our riding public to have a say in, you know, what they want to see GMT be and become. We've lost, I think, a lot of rider support through some of these processes. And I think by continuing to, like, if we're just doing the work and kind of setting the tone without allowing riders to contribute to that process, I think that we'll continue to see people lose trust in GMT.
Well, let's dive in. Let's get, I think I'm intrigued. So let's get going.
Yeah, so I think, there's sort of the two most recent sort of attempts at service guidelines that the organization has undertaken. Some folks may have remember this, some may not have been on the board yet. So the last time was during the pandemic. One of the things that the organization was working on was the Transit Strategic Plan. As you may recall, this included a variety of topics. There was sort of an overall visioning piece. And then the idea was to have sort of every department and every facet of the organization sort of fit under this Transit Strategic Plan. And one of those pieces was a sort of service guidelines. And we'll share all this after the meeting. And so that particular document, I can share that. I'll make sure to zoom in so everyone can see it. So this particular document, it wasn't lengthy, but what it really did was, one thing that I'll highlight from it is, one, it really included the route performance report sort of standards as part of that process. And two, it really, I'm trying to find the page I wanted to show. Oh yeah, here we go. So the one piece that I think this document did really well is really identify some of the data points that are key for staff and the organization to look at. So we may want to change what those data points are, but this looked at sort of productivity and cost effectiveness, which was related to the route performance report. But it also included other items that we do look at, but sort of wasn't included as part of the decision-making process. So one is crowding on different routes and what those route types are. Another is reliability, so sort of the on-time performance for our existing routes, and what maybe on-time performance may look like for new routes as we think about either expanding our service or modifying our service. And it also looked at schedule efficiency. So these are all, this is one example, and this one really focused on a lot of the data. And I think one thing that you'll hear in a couple of weeks as part of the assessment reform process is, what is the data that the organization is using when looking at assessments for its local municipalities, and also how does that tie into this service planning process. And so you'll see when you look through this, there's a lot of overlap between this document and the other one that I'm going to talk about. But this was really the sort of last attempt at a service guidelines process. And so the other one, if I can swap screens, let's see if this works. Of course, it's not working. Let's see. So the other one was, let's get that up, was the next gen service change. So that was back in 2018, 2019. What the board ultimately voted on in that particular process was a whole list of service changes that GMT implemented back in June of 2019. But as part of that process, some may recall that Nelson Nygaard, who was the consultant at the time, did provide a sort of service guidelines document that was really less on the numbers and more on sort of those concepts. What are the concepts that transit agencies look for when designing service? And you can see that in sort of I think the table of contents really outlines that well, in sort of what different types of items service may look like. And you may see a lot of these, and a lot of these look probably familiar from when we went through that survey last year at the onset of the sort of service reduction process. Those are pieces that agencies are looking at. Looks like Paul has a question.
Chris, could I just ask a question here? Under the service design principles,
Yep.
Do we have anything that looks at what those design principles are, looking within a community and then connecting communities?
This particular document doesn't address it that way, but I think if that's something that the board wants to look at, that's something we can certainly figure out how to adapt that for that kind of context. because this is really looking at it as the system as a whole. But I think within that, one of the pieces where I think that can be addressed is there are different, all of these types of documents talk about different route categories. And so if we're looking at a route category that's sort of inter-community, that could potentially be one where there's different design principles for that versus, say, a commuter route or some other high frequency route. And that can sort of feed what those sort of inter-community routes look like.
I know I would be interested in looking at the system in that way and having a better understanding of how those principles might be different.
Yeah, so
So-
I think that would be the point where we can sort of include that
Thank
in this work. Paul?
Two quick questions. One, Chris, can you talk about the relationship between these two documents? Because the first one you showed was dated 2021, and the Nelson Nygaard report, I think, as you said, is 2018, 2019. So, like, how should we be looking at the two of them? And then just a quick request that it would be great to be able to see these documents. I'm sure that they're available somewhere, but if you can share them afterwards, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so after this meeting, I will share these two documents as well as the sort of outline that I provided at the beginning of the meeting, and that that outline document will get updated as we go. And so, I think when you're looking at these two documents, they're sort of focusing on two different pieces. The Nelson Nygaard one really is on those sort of design concepts, and the other one, which was from the Transit Strategic Plan, really is on what metrics would we use to sort of evaluate service. So one is sort of this broad strokes approach, and then the other is some metrics. And I think ultimately sort of these two flavors will get integrated into whatever this future rule may look like.
And sorry, just a quick follow-up. So to what extent are the service design principles from the Nelson Nygaard report part of the route design that currently exists or that existed following that, or was that sort of like, I'm just trying to understand how to mentally place that work?
Yeah, so the Nelson Nygaard study, that like I said, was part of a large, probably the largest service change that GMT had within the past 5-10 years or 5 to 8 years. And so what that really did was, that, as you may recall, that had interline service. So we had the route color naming system. And so that was sort of a service principle that got integrated into that as a result of that. It also brought about 20-minute service that we had on a lot of routes and really tried to sort of smooth out the service curves that we had previously. Those are the two big ones. Jamie, am I missing any other sort of overarching concepts that particular?
No, I don't think so.
And I think one of the things from the next gen process, there are some pieces that are certainly still at play, I think, in our service design, but there are some things that we sort of walked away from. One is obviously the route naming convention, and two, I think we've tried to the Nelson Nygaard study, I think, was a little bit aggressive in terms of how aggressive that service looked and ended up costing the organization a lot of money. And so we've sort of walked back some of that, which is really on sort of the scheduling side. And those are the pieces that sort of my department's looking at to ensure that whatever service we're putting out there hopefully can meet the needs, but also not put the organization in a negative financial situation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Chris, I do kind of want to just follow up on that. And so just for background, for folks, the next gen study, which had been designed to have changes that would be cost neutral, ended up costing us more to implement. And I'm just wondering, Chris, is there, I don't want us to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but at the same time, I just want to make sure that, when we look at the service prioritization that's in this document, did some of the assumptions that led to overspending come from that service prioritization, or just because we, maybe didn't understand the scheduling as well as we should have?
I think the big piece ultimately is, and I think this was more addressed in the TSP piece than the next gen, but really the schedule efficiency piece, that's the piece where that's really that's the piece where I think schedules were developed as a result of NextGen that did not meet what the actual sort of realities were on the road. And so that was one in terms of the actual timing of routes, and the other was as part of the change to the route coloring system and the interlining concept. We actually, as part of NextGen, a rider was promised that, hey, you could get from Northgate in the new North End all the way out to Williston and not have to switch buses. And what we found, a year and a half, 2 years into that is that wasn't actually the case. Drivers have to take a break. We don't have drivers take a lunch break or other operational pieces that I think we found it was around 65% of the time that we were actually able to deliver on that promise. And the other 40%, we just couldn't do because of the operational reality of the type of service that we offer. And so those are certainly some lessons learned that we will incorporate to make sure that these standards are things that we can actually do.
I will also note with NextGen, there was a huge cost burden because some service that was slated in the NextGen plan to be removed, the board ultimately decided to keep because of public process. So there was about $80,000 in service reductions in Essex town that the NextGen plan had said, it wasn't part of the final plan, but ultimately through the public process, and we had, 40 people at a public meeting explaining why that would be a bad idea. So that ultimately was a contributor to the cost as well.
Yeah, so that's really just sort of high level what the two documents that I'll send after this meeting are as you look through them. So what we'll do is there's a couple things. We'll look at this. As I mentioned, we're going to be doing a review of what other agencies have done as part of this. So we hope to sort of report back on that work at the next leadership committee meeting. And then moving forward, I think the timeline piece. So as we think about how we get rider engagement, how we get partner organization engagement, how we get staff input, board input, I think as we think about what that timeline may look like, and we just sort of present a really rough draft. Again, it may change as this process goes on, but I think that will help you all get a better picture of sort of the work that we're doing and what that may look like.
So go ahead.
Would it be okay if, as commissioners, we offered to hold a listening session in our communities? Put in some language that this is an opportunity with the changes that are taking place within GMT structure to reimagine transit in Chittenden County, and just invite folks to come and talk, share their thinking, or is that something that?
I
Yeah.
think that's something that member communities should totally be doing. That I think that's part of, why you're all on the board, right? Like, because you have a vested interest in your community and transportation. I would love to see towns and cities holding listening sessions. I do think that we just need to be careful about how we're communicating. It's great to hold the sessions and have people come in and talk, but we don't want to set expectations that as an organization we'll be able to implement every idea or every change. But yes, we would totally support that, and we would help advertise those listening sessions. And I think that's a really great idea.
Could you help maybe provide some language around how to introduce the invitation to folks to participate in a listening session in a way that just met the concerns you just raised?
Yeah, absolutely.
And timing wise, like in the next couple of months, that would be useful? Like October?
Yeah, I mean, I think October, we'll get more into the timeline of the planning process and what the engagement timeline looks like. And I think if we can coordinate those listening sessions to be happening around the same time that GMT, like our rider group and our stakeholder group are also kind of doing that work, then we can be getting all of that information at once to hand over to the planning department to kind of guide, you know, what is the next year's transit look like, or, you know, it will help their department come up with a plan to present to the board. But I think if we're all doing that together at the same time, then there wouldn't be a gap, right? Like you wouldn't do it in October and we did it in February, and then people would feel like, okay, I provided feedback a really long time ago. So once we decide what that timeline is all together, then I think it would be appropriate to start holding those types of sessions.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead, Paul, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that all for community input. I think it's important that we have the basic structure that we're talking about today and maybe in the next meeting or two kind of laid out, and that the leadership committee, the board, are sort of on the same page about what are we asking, so that we don't have different communities asking different questions. And you know, the whole purpose of this set ourselves up for success in the coming years. So I just want to, I love the idea, and also let's make sure that we're structured in the way we're doing it.
Fair and appreciated. Thank you. I just want to make sure that we are kicking this off appropriately. There's nothing else, Chris and Jamie, that was on your list that we need to discuss today. This is to get us started, and we'll return. We're going to meet regularly every other week or every 2 weeks to really dive in. And I appreciate the look at both historically what we've had and what other agencies do. That's helpful to have references.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll send everything out after this meeting. So you all have sort of the 3 documents we looked at today that, and particularly that outline document, will certainly be adjusting as we dig deeper into this work.
Great. Looking forward
Chris,
to it.
how many
Thank
of
you.
these documents do we have on our webpage?
So
Right.
none of them they're not board approved documents. The next gen information we took down after we walked back next gen changes. And the transit strategic plan never became a board approved plan. It was all in draft form. So
I'll send it out right after the meeting, so you all will have it as soon as the meeting concludes.
All right. Thank you. There's only one other potential item on our agenda, which is a potential executive session to discuss a personnel matter, I believe, Clayton.
Correct.
And because my head has not been screwed on very tightly lately, I know there was, you and I had some emails, but that's the topic that we are going to discuss, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry to be quiet.
And so we do have a potential personnel matter, which we do not have to have a finding for, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So who would you like to invite into this conversation, or who do I want to invite into this conversation?
I would say probably at this time, just myself.
Okay. Alrighty. So if one of my fellow commissioners would like to move that we go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter, I would greatly appreciate that, with only Clayton included.
So
So
moved.
moved. Oh.
So we get
Second. Take a choice.
we've got lots of firsts and seconds. Any further discussion? Paul?
Just a quick clarification. I don't think I'll be joining, but for future reference, is this members of the committee or members of the board automatically who participate?
Oh, I don't know. That was a good question. I don't know the answer to that. We don't have an RPC person. So Bob, you're my like super board person.
Yeah, I don't know the actual rule. I would My opinion is if you're a member of the board, you should be allowed to participate without a special invite. But
With the special invite, but I assume the automatic is the.
no, I said without a
Oh.
special invite. So I would think any
Okay.
member of the board should be allowed to participate. But
Okay.
on top of that, I recommend a change to the motion to include Paul.
I'm not gonna attend. I just wanted to know whether
okay.
it's whether procedurally going forward, how we should look at these things. So maybe that's something that we could get, Clayton, maybe we could get staff's perspective on that for the future. I have to run today anyway. I just want to be following the correct rules.
Thank you. I appreciate.
Yeah, it's a question for Catherine.
Okay, thanks.
All right. With that, not quite answered, but no longer needed to be answered. All those in favor of moving into executive session with Clayton and board commissioners, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we are entering executive session at 12:21, and I'm just going to give a few moments for staff members to hop off. It was nice seeing you all. Thank you for being here. Is that
Yeah,
everybody?
looks like yes.
All right. Do you want me to introduce the topic, or would you like to?
Totally up to you. I'm happy either way. You want me to? I'm happy to spit it out.
Well, I'll kick it off and then I'll. What's that? Oh, sorry. So Clayton emailed me and I actually didn't hear that.
I'll defer to you.
Oh, okay. Clayton had emailed me earlier this week, and I was not kidding that my head is not screwed on very tightly with a proposal for a change to his reimbursement, his annual salary, outlining several different reasons. And I wasn't able to respond to that until was it yesterday? So I didn't get a chance to talk it through. But thought we should talk about it with our leadership team. Do you want to I can't look at it at the same time I'm talking to you, but outlined some very good reasons as to why a change might be appropriate. Do you want to talk us through?
Sure, and I want to start off by saying that I don't have a time frame for when this decision needs to be had, so it's not something that we have to figure out today. My preference would be that before the board votes on their fiscal year 27 budget, that we have the decision by then so that it's included in the budget. Essentially what I'm asking for is that prior to my arrival, we had established $150,000 as the appropriate pay for the general manager. I had accepted 125 on my arrival because I did not have any Trasnet experience and saw this as an experiment and felt that having the lower end of the range made sense. I think with my 3-year point coming up in January, that continuing to have my salary based on that initial amount of 125, I think no longer makes as much sense as it did. And so what my request that I had sent to Amy and to Paul, and I'd be happy to send to the full leadership committee, was that we go back to that 150. We include the cost of living increases that would happen for fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 27. The reason why not the others is because for fiscal year 25 and 26, I had chosen to have my pay increase be converted to additional CTO, and I would like to continue that. And so my request, I believe, was for 162,000, which would be the 150 plus the cost of living increase for those 2 years. And so that's what I'm asking for your consideration, and happy to answer any questions, and certainly can jet off if you all would like to discuss without my presence.
Okay, hang on. It looks like Susan has a question.
Yeah,
Susan?
just, could you clarify the 150,000, where did that number come from? What, was that the previous general
So-
manager salary, or was that an offer? Or- Yeah,
So that was not what the previous general manager was making. John was the previous general manager. This was what was budgeted with the thinking that that's what it would take to hire a new general manager. And Paul was part of that process, and I bet you he can answer.
Well, that was a range, and obviously we didn't know what kind of experience we would have when we looked for a manager. So we set a range, which really based on what we were paying John and going forward from 125 to 150. So when Clayton came on board with nice experience, but not in the proper transit agency, he was given, offered, and he accepted the 125.
Okay. And so this is, yeah, go ahead, Susan. Were you going to say more?
I was just gonna ask the other members of the committee if they wanted a chance to chat on our own.
Yeah, I was going to move there. So unless anybody has any more questions for Clayton, I think Clayton will excuse you, although I don't know how to end the meeting.
I'm going to make, now, because you're on the phone, Amy, I'm actually gonna make Andrea the host.
Thank you.
And all I'll need is for one of you to email me or Jamie with the time that you come out of executive session and when you adjourn.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thanks. Okay. And so
Amy,
yeah.
a quick question. Do we record executive sessions? Because
No.
this isn't being
Oh.
recorded now?
No,
Recording
Andrea,
was
can
just-
you stop?
it actually said it was
Um,
on. Yeah, it says recording is still on.
Yep. Maybe.
Yes, I do see that. I don't know how to stop that. Oh, wait, here. Stop recording.